Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to another installment of A Rebel Without Applause, coming to you from two very distant locations. One right here in my television studio apartment in the wood of the holly under the sign. And then on the other side of this very slender digital divide, coming to you from Rotterdam in the Netherlands, is a talented person across many, many areas. She's with me on the other side of this digital divide. Her name is Daphne Chirodozie Duruoha. And I want to thank you for joining me as part of this series, Ukraine Voices. And first, repeat your name so people hear it correctly in case I butchered it.
It's Daphne Chirodozie Duruoha.
Chirodozie Duruoha. You have a foot in the Ukraine, but there's a deeper identity there for you as well. And that's, you're from Nigeria, is that correct?
I'm Nigerian.
And let's just get some facts going. I don't mean to be too much like an interrogator, but just basically give me an overview of your journey from your home country to Ukraine to where you're sitting right now.
Well, I still am a student in Ukraine, a student of international law, and I was also modeling in Ukraine. My journey from Nigeria to Ukraine is a very long story, but to put it shortly, I was formerly in Russia, also as a student.
Okay.
And then, like I mentioned earlier, I left for home and I joined my sister to study in Ukraine. That's not where my modeling career kicked off. It did kick off in Russia, but then I'd say it was in Ukraine that I was older. I had way more experiences as that when I was modeling in Ukraine. So that's where I'd say the big parts of my modeling took place.
Were you in Ukraine when the war began?
Yes. I spent some time in Russia. I speak Russian better than I speak Ukrainian. It's shameful, but then it is what it is.
Having been in both places, Ukraine and Russia, how has that affected your reaction to this catastrophic war? How have you been able to process that?
Well, I wasn't the only one that transferred from Russia to Ukraine. So I'd say first, when all the buzz was going on with Russia invading Ukraine, when it was all on the news, we did not take it too seriously because we'd lived in Russia and we just always felt like Russia is a civilized nation, one. Two, Russia and Ukraine have always had this back and forth. I remember a professor in school saying the thing going on between Russia and Ukraine is what goes on between siblings, how you have two siblings always fighting, but they'd always reconcile and it would never escalate. And it's just part of the relationship. So this is how it affected my view of the war. Mm-hmm. Plus, I was going to work while everything was going on in the news. I had work, I had school. In Kyiv, where I lived, everything was going on as usual. But then we would see on the news that there were Russian troops at the border and whatnot. And we felt it was some sort of media propaganda to cause panic. And then what happened. And then found out that it wasn't just about that. There was way more to it.
And how long did you stay in Kyiv before you were able to leave?
It would have been 3 years by April, but the war happened in February, so...
Oh, so you were there from February to April during the height of those battles?
Oh, no. I was there for maybe a week. Precisely after I heard the first explosion go off, I was there for just one night. I'd say 2 days, 2 mornings, and after that I left. I stayed in the bunker for just one night, and after that night, I found my way out, sort of. It was so chaotic, but I did find my way out.
And describe what that was like.
Well, this is where the writer that I told you about comes in, because I feel like it just, as a writer, I give more vivid descriptions when I've written something down. So right. I just read it if you're comfortable with that. Yeah.
When you are, yeah. And I would want to preface that is that you are a writer. And I had an opportunity to read a few of your short stories. And there is definitely a big talent there waiting to be heard. So, yeah, you're welcome to describe in any way you can what that experience was. So, by all means.
It took me so much time to call myself a writer because I just I was just always writing, and it was a very big part of my life. I did not see it as a title until I actually had to admit that there was something more to just being a scribbler. And then if I get emotional while I'm reading, just go on with it, because going back to the memories, they bring back very serious chills. But I feel like I'd be able to control myself, I hope. It's a 3-part short piece. Okay. And this is the first part about the morning when everything happened. There's a flood of memories from the days leading up to our escape from the Russian invasion. It's barely 5 a.m. in the morning. Mary and I are sleeping when Yvonne runs into the room half naked, terrified. She's ordering us to jump out of bed, pack up, and head for the elevator. I am still very sleepy. I try to pacify her, interrogate, when an explosion goes off and shakes our apartment building. We live on the 19th floor of a 20-story building, almost 7.8 meters far from the foundation. And so, from the moment we scream, "Blood of Jesus," to the moment we find ourselves in the bunkers, I do not know what my life has become. Sunrise to sunset, the quietness of my dear Kyiv is infiltrated with air raid alarms, alerts, going off at every corner. Yes, this is basically the first part. And I'd say it was after this day that I'd realized we were in for big trouble. I don't even know what to say. Well, there actually isn't much to say. Everything I have to say about the first part of the war, I said it there. I'd maybe just go on reading it and then probably read the third part, the last part of the short story. It's day 2, 3, or 4 of our journey out to the border. I don't exactly remember. I lost count. We are all trying to doze off. The train rides slowly until it stops in the middle of nowhere. An announcement comes on and we shine our eyes in fear. The speaker is almost whispering. Vymknіть усі пристрої. Будьте тихі. Будь ласка, мовчіть і не панікуйте. We've been instructed to stay quiet, not panic, and switch off all our devices. Something about this instruction sounds like a plea. The speaker starts off stern, but softens and begs. Repeating words faithfully, it almost sounds like a prayer. The woman in front of me follows suit. Nie placz. Будь ласка, не плачь. No, don't cry, please. Don't cry. Many women join her. They instruct their babies to adhere. They pacify, soften, then beg. For the life of me, time has not known a more strenuous and bitter lengthening. Our train is finally night dark after what seems like a lifetime. Everybody and everything is still. Desert quiet, but for the cry of terrified children running out the windows into the empty streets, long withered from explosions and cold. The second part basically captures my journey leaving. I'd say that at the moment when this scene in particular happened, I was stuck in between fear and pity because we were in a loaded train, a packed train. I was scared for my life. And by the way, I wasn't by myself. We moved in a group of 6. So I sort of had people around me. But constantly, we had to stop in the middle of nowhere, so many nowheres, and we'd have to switch off our phones. We'd have to stay quiet, try not to move. We didn't ask questions, so I cannot exactly say why, but I'm guessing it's to keep us safe and ensure that there wasn't any maybe Russian troop in the corner. That's basically about that. And yeah, I just go ahead to the last part.
Go ahead.
A pale, lanky Ukrainian man, lips almost colorless, was asked to leave our cabinet with his small, tired-looking backpack. He tried to explain that he was sick and couldn't stay back to fight. But security picked him up and led him out. You're sick? Okay, where's the doctor's report? Just show us the doctor's report. They clamored and clamored till our train took off. I held my gaze forward. I was too tired to break down again. Wasn't it just a few hours ago when my heart lapsed at the sight of a man crying profusely in the train because he couldn't let go of his son's hands, and the wards insisted only the boy could board. And other men, tall, short, slim, bulk, stomping off in very fast and shaky steps, hiding their agony whenever they paused to look back and wave or blow firm kisses to their family. I held my gaze forward. Since I couldn't sleep, it was at least my duty to ensure that I could stay up and finish this journey with my sanity. There was no need catching visual memories capable of paralyzing me. And so I stayed stiff and looked ahead until, lo and behold, me and my forward held coward gaze, I met few minutes to the border by an assemblage of stranded Black foreigners. My skin collapses. Some of the faces are familiar and some are just terribly tortured. Older men sit on the floor, shiver and hold blankets to their chests as the more youthful men struggle with the officials and threaten to pull down the walls of earth if they're not allowed a fighting chance to save themselves. How would you let them go before us? How would you let them in before us? The men bitterly chorus. They're dogs. Some human beings are dying from cold, and you put dogs before us. Dogs? What the fuck? Sorry, I cursed, but it's part of the write-up. Yes, this is basically about it. When I was done reading or writing this piece, I had some of my friends around, my sister and a couple of the people I traveled with. I was sampling their opinions. And I mentioned something that I think is still very striking to me, which is that I titled the war the results. Very few things are usually about the results. War is not just about war. War is about gender. War is about race. War is about abuse of power. War is about it's about things that ideally and not only do not only make up the story of bombs and explosions. I mentioned this because prior to writing this three-part story, I'd seen so many things and I'd felt so many things. I did not know exactly what to write about. And to be honest, I was skeptical. I did not know if to mention the last part that I just read about what I saw was going on with some of the Black men and later on women. I wasn't sure if I should include it because I was very privileged. It didn't happen to me. I was very privileged because I was a mother in Ukraine. I had so many people volunteer to take me out. I had so many people recommend routes to me, Ukrainians. So I felt some sort of gratitude that made me initially just feel like the war wasn't about me. It wasn't about any person of color. The war was about Ukrainians, people that actually, in the original sense, if I should put it that way, had just lost their homes. So I did not know if to write about the last part that I included. It was after telling myself genuinely that war isn't about just one thing. War can never be just about even the things that I experienced myself. So I got serious comfortability speaking about it because it's the whole story. And I cannot bring myself to tell the story without telling that part. Because especially I was privileged, like I said. I knew so many Ukrainians. I had so many Ukrainians as friends. So I saw the war through their eyes a whole lot, to a very great extent, if I should put it that way. And until I saw what was happening that day, or until I witnessed what I witnessed, I didn't even realize that there was going to be any racism card, if I should put it that way. But yeah, that's about it. Hopefully you understood everything I read.
I did. The struggle of racism in the United States is very often on my mind and in my face, but we don't hear about how war and conflict and poverty exposes those issues in other parts of the world, specifically in your case, Ukraine. And your little anecdote offered some insight into that, in a way that most people don't really think about. So I appreciate it and your story.
Yeah.
So That took you to what, the Polish border, and now you're in Rotterdam. Have you been able to reestablish the flow of your education and your modeling career in Europe?
Like I said, I have come to recognize until the war happened, I did not even know it was a thing, but I have come to recognize very serious privilege. It's also what made me skeptical. I didn't know if I should talk about the racism card or not, because like I said, I tried my best not to make it about me or people of color, foreigners. I tried to make it about the people that I felt were the centerpiece of the war. I'm mentioning that because since moving here, I've lived in 3 different countries. I've gotten so many recommendations from Ukrainian friends. I was introduced to you by a Ukrainian friend. I've gotten recommendations on how to get back on my modeling career. I have a meeting sometime in June with some of the people that I worked with in Ukraine. About my modeling, it's right now, it's not a priority on my list. I'm still going to school online. I'm trying to fix my accommodation. I'm trying to fix getting an actual, I wouldn't call it 9 to 5, but a student job. And so many other things. I left Germany, where I initially was with family, my brother and his family, and I moved to Netherlands. So far, it's been both good and bad. Somehow, I always find that I have a bad experience with getting something, but people have it worse. So I guess I'm just grateful.
It takes some wisdom to recognize your own privilege in this world sometimes, and you've been able to do that. And you're studying also for the law. Now, you originally were studying to be a doctor in Russia, and in the intervening period, you've had this interesting modeling career. The larger academic goal is to become an international lawyer. Is that right?
Yes, I always wanted to be a doctor. I was so sure. I was in medical school with my sister, and I had a phase where I realized that if I wasn't in the arts, I probably wouldn't be mentally stable. So I left and I went back home to my parents that surprisingly supported me. And yes, after being in Nigeria for a couple of years, I moved to Ukraine to study international law.
And how's that going?
That's going great. I always say it's one of the best decisions I made, because funny enough, I didn't even make the decision myself. It was my sister who called home and said, she's coming back. I can't continue seeing her like this. It was such a dramatic phase, so sensitive. But then, yes, I had a little depression phase and I went back home because, like I said, I always wanted to be a medical student. So it wasn't a case of I didn't want to do this. I was so confused. But I'd say that especially because I'd stopped writing, I did not recognize myself. I did not understand what was going on in my life. So now I'm looking forward to being an international lawyer
and writer. And you join a proud Nigerian literary tradition. And as tragic as this experience has been for Ukraine and the world, it's for a writer to live through something so cataclysmic. It is, in a way, a gift to bear witness. And how you process that as a writer is a very important challenge going forward, right?
Yes, definitely. I've had so many people say, Daphne, you should write a book. You should do this. You should do that. And maybe the anecdote I read is closest to almost everything I can do, because writing it, talking about it, it's so sensitive. It's so sensitive. I can barely even write about the Biafran war that happened in Nigeria many years ago that I did not experience myself. This is way out of board, way out of line for me.
Now, Nigeria has this history of a struggle against colonial oppression.
Yes.
And this war between Russia and the Ukraine, there is a colonial sort of echo there between Russia trying to establish its iron fist over what they believe to be part of larger Mother Russia, when in fact there's a very different and powerful cultural identity going on there.
Yes, I totally understand what you're saying. Before Ukraine gained its independence, Ukraine was part of former Soviet Union, the USSR.
Correct.
So Ukraine, it even shows in the fact that, like I said, I speak Russian. So many people in the capital city of Ukraine speak Russian. It still looks so much, even if Russia is known to a very good extent to be just that bad guy, it looked so much like bullying to me. That's why I said it looked so much like abuse of power. It looks so much like something that I recognize. And that's why I said that the war, what's usually, when you say war, what comes to people's minds before you experience it is their explosions. This country has sent troops and they're like armored tanks. But genuinely, not just genuinely, but in details, there is rape, there's gender conversations about bullying, conversations about betrayal. Because funny enough, there are, of course, there are insiders in Ukraine, Russian insiders in Ukraine.
Right.
So it's something that I recognize both as Nigerian and as someone that really just experienced the war and analyzed it in class so many times. I saw that it wasn't really about the fact that Russia is powerful. It had so much to do with very little things, propaganda.
I always say the more personal the journey, the more universal. There's a universal truth to your personal story. So I find that as illuminating as anything, especially, the kind of racial insights that you offered in your short story there. The picture that I was trying to get was what your life in Nigeria was like before you even left.
I was going to boarding school, and prior to what happened, prior to the insurgents, the only personal experience I've had with war is, like I said, the Biafran War, the civil war in Nigeria. But I'd only heard stories, but very personal stories. However, another reason why I'd say that even as an international law student, I was still put in Ukraine in Kyiv, after all the drama was going on in the news, is because, I don't know if you know it, but almost everywhere I go to, almost every time I travel and I say I'm Nigerian, the first thing most people ask about is the Boko Haram insurgents in the northern part of Nigeria. So it happens to be that if you live in Nigeria, when you hear the news or when you leave Nigeria and you hear Boko Haram described by foreigners, described in the news, it's totally different from what our experience is living in other states in Nigeria. The dramatic and very, very negative impact of the terrorism group. If you don't live in the northern part of Nigeria, you most likely would not have any personal experience of Boko Haram. And prior to the outbreak between Ukraine and Russia, there was always some sort of threat of force between Russia and Ukraine. The Donbas region was, even before I became a student, the Donbas region in Ukraine, it was invaded by Russia. Crimea was annexed by Russia. So many of all these things were going on. I think even in 2014, I cannot remember, not Mariupol, I can't remember the name of the city, but it was also attacked by Russia. So when we heard that Russian troops were at the border, we thought they were coming for one other small city, or they were trying to make another dramatic entrance into a part of Ukraine that they felt originally belonged to Russia. Nobody saw an outbreak of war. So yes, that's how I can relate my state of mind when the war started off in Ukraine and how it is in Nigeria. Being Nigerian, I was so comfortable. Plus, just because it's on the news and there's a buzz, it doesn't mean it's actually going to affect you, especially if you live maybe in the capital or if you live a little far from where it's happening.
So if you don't see it, it's not there, was sort of the mindset.
Sort of. We know how bad it gets being in Ukraine, but then I have work, I have school. Basically, my whole life was centered in Kyiv, so I could not leave Ukraine because I heard, or because I was suspecting that some other city far away was going to get in trouble or was going to get in a bad situation with Russia. And like I said, this is not to downplay what actually happens, both with the Boko Haram situation and with the situation of annexing Crimea. It's not to downplay that, but I cannot say that I'd seen or that I had someone, I just heard about it in school. I'd heard about it reading the news. I'd heard about it from our professors. Everybody knows that Crimea was annexed. So it's that sort of thing.
Russia fought a war called the Crimean War in the 1840s for Sebastopol and that very same piece of earth. Well, Daphne, your journey is a unique one. What's your summer look like? Is it school? Is it modeling? Where can people see you or find you or read about you or more importantly, read your important literary offerings? I want to give the world a chance to find out about Daphne.
Mostly on Instagram. I usually say Instagram is my portfolio because that's where I have everything going on. I'm trying to also move a little to Facebook because I seem to have a very good audience there that I've been taking for granted. But yes, Daphne Duruoha on Instagram, that's where I do most of my social stuff. And what my summer is looking like is modeling. I have summer vacation from school and I'm in the Netherlands now. I'm sort of in the citadel of international law because right here in Den Haag, there's the International Criminal Court, ICJ. So hopefully I'd also be doing something useful and impactful for the global community while I'm here as a diplomat to be. And like I say, there's no season for my writing. So summer, winter, every time writing is always in the picture.
The Hague has, of course, been the international location where all these war crimes have been arbitrated over the last decades. Yep. So it's quite conceivable that war crimes will be prosecuted, hopefully, in the near future, and that the catastrophe that is in Ukraine will find a hopeful outcome. I don't know what it will be.
Fingers crossed, it definitely be victory. I'd love to see that happen.
Right. I would like to see reparations paid, the borders restored, a regime change in Russia for the benefit of Russian people.
For the benefit of Russian people and the whole world.
The whole world. Well, this is sort of the existential question that I've asked myself, is how much of this is an expression of one person's malevolence and how much of it is an expression of a cultural, political, racial, whatever problem you want to call for Russia?
I also cannot give a precise answer, but then I think a huge part of it, like we said, because Ukraine and Russia have this, not colonial, sort of, they have the USSR that happened before this time. So Ukraine seemed like an easy target for Russia because of the colonial history. So a whole lot of it has to do with that fact, but then also has to do with the fact that Russia is a very powerful country and other powerful countries are obviously supporting, but I mean, it's just Ukraine in the war right now.
Right. Well, I'm hopeful that you'll be able to go back there under more peaceful times. You are very enchanting. There's an incredibly attractive package inside and out there.
When things get better, hopefully very soon, when you come to visit Ukraine, I'm going to be your tour guide because I have a different eye for Ukraine. I like to say that. So I take you to Odessa. Ukraine is like my home. So I would be your tour guide because even if you have some other person to take you around, I feel like if you say Ukraine through my eyes, then I just like to share that.
I want to get there and I want the tour. I mean, we are connected and friends. So
definitely.
As a matter of fact, I even friend requested you on Facebook today. So
that's good. Just today.
You know, there's a saying, next year in Jerusalem. Let's just say next year in Kyiv.
Definitely. Thanks for inviting me. And like I was saying before we started off, I love what you're doing. Yeah, I love everything about it. The art, the topic about race, everything. It's just, I'm very, very interested in humanity. So inherently, I'm also interested in justice, interested in little things.
I'm very moved that you would say that. And as a final thought, I would say that justice and peace are two links. We understand just as humans what's fair and what's not. The laws are just the way to kind of codify that. And when things are fair, generally we have peace in this world. That's just the way it flows from the sandbox in kindergarten to the European capitals. So that's my final thought. I just want to thank you again, Daphne, for this conversation. Until next time, namaste, shalom, and aloha. By that I mean namasaloha.